Good afternoon, everyone. We are here to start an advisory design panel meeting for Thursday, October 17th. We'll start by welcoming everyone and acknowledging that we are holding this meeting on the Squamish Nation traditional territory. Our first item will be an adoption of the agenda.
I noticed there's, I don't know how nitpicky you were supposed to be, but there's, it says Tanis Shelty recused himself from the meeting as he is the architect for the next project.
Is this the agenda or the minutes from last meeting?
Yeah, I'm skipping ahead. That's the minutes.
Yeah, we'll approach that. But thanks for letting me know. So a second for the agenda?
So did Mike move it?
No, I was talking about
Sarah
saying.
did.
Sarah did.
Sarah did.
Is that what you want?
All in favor? Okay, and the second item will be approval of last meeting's minutes, and we'll start with some discussion.
I just noticed that we referred to Tanis as himself and he instead of herself and she in the minutes from last week.
We can make that change, thanks very much. Is there any other comments on the minutes from last meeting? No comments, so we'll move to accept those or adopt those minutes. Okay, second?
I can see it.
All good? Okay, all in favor? There we go, and the first item of business is zoning amendment bylaw 2657, and we'll hand over to Carrie Hamilton, our planner.
Hi everyone, Carrie Hamilton, planner of the District of Squamish. This is a different project for the committee today. This is a zoning amendment bylaw 2657-2018. We don't typically bring zoning amendment bylaws to this committee this early on, but this one is rezoning from a C2 vehicle fueling station to a C4 downtown commercial, and it falls under DPA 3 and DPA 5 guidelines. And staff have kind of raised a few concerns regarding the form and character of this building early on, and so we thought it would be of value to bring it to this committee first before it goes to council, as we're just concerned that the fact that there wasn't meeting some of those DPA guidelines, that would impact its rezoning potential. So wanted to get this feedback from you early on. The applicants were also supportive of that idea, just to make sure that they're heading in the right direction. So we'll come back to this committee if it is a successful rezoning and proceeds to a development permit. So this is not kind of the final time you'll look at it, but staff have highlighted just a few things that we wanted to focus in on and get your comments regarding. They are specifically the overall cornice and column design aesthetic, the use of stucco material, the corner plaza, Cleveland frontage, amenity space functionality, and uncertainty for the function of the proposed tandem commercial parking. So under departmental comments, I go into a little bit more detail about all of those components. So for the first one would be the false historic reference. DPA 3 speaks to having buildings really having authentically integrate elements distinct to Squamish, and speaks to avoiding false historic and structural references. And the development's choice of columns and cornices seems to contradict both of these guidelines. So staff and the applicant are actually seeking ADP's recommendations on if this building form and character is acceptable in Squamish before proceeding to rezoning. Staff have also flagged some concerns just regarding the materials. So DPA 5 speaks to preserving the historic high street character and identity of Cleveland Avenue, and DPA 3 speaks to achieving a cohesive and unified building image that complements the character of the surrounding neighborhoods. And staff is just seeking ADP's comments on the materials chosen, specifically the stucco being proposed, and provide recommendations on how this development can better integrate into the existing and future Cleveland vernacular. The third piece is the plaza corner. This site of Winnipeg and Cleveland is highlighted in our official community plan as a prominent corner plaza. And so what we're really trying to see is how this building and the massing of that corner really can integrate into this corner plaza feel that we're trying to achieve. The DPA 5 guidelines go into a lot of detail around what those corner plazas should be, and so we'd love to get ADP's comments on how this building is meeting that, or how they could better meet those guidelines. The fourth piece is the tandem commercial parking. So they are meeting all of their required parking, and the zoning bylaw actually doesn't speak to anything around saying they can't have tandem parking. So this particular development is proposing 3 sets of tandem commercial parking, and we're just, because this is a rezoning, we do have discretion to say, despite that it's supported in the zoning bylaw, we have some discretion to say, hey, this might not work, this could work. So we'd love to get your comments on functionality of those stalls. And then the last, I think there's actually 2 more. So the 5th one is the Cleveland frontage. So staff are just looking to see ADP's comments on how they could possibly break up the massing between the commercial sites and the residential entrance. It kind of seems like just a long massing on both sides, and just wanted to get your comments on that, on the frontage. And the last one is the amenity space. So we have regulation in our zoning bylaw that multifamily developments with more than 20 units have to provide indoor amenity space. And the indoor amenity space also has guidelines in the development permit guidelines, and they speak to having light and having some outdoor opportunity, and their particular amenity space is proposed on the interior lot line in a kind of small corridor of open space attached to it. And so just looking to get the committee's comments on the functionality and usability of that space, and if that's if the outdoor space is needed, if it's necessary, or how they could better make it better suit the guidelines. That's it from staff. And I'll just highlight that Matt Dunn is here today as the acting director in place of Jonas. So he's here to answer any bigger comments that the committee might have.
Is there a presentation from the proponent?
Yeah, the applicant will come for, or the
Okay.
architect.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm usually very low voice. Thank you very much, everybody. Gary, thank you for the explanation. I'll just go quickly for the points 5 points that I think it's important to be discussed. One is about this historical reference. And what I had in mind, what we understand the intent of DP3 with respect to historical reference, and have made an effort to fashion a unique and celebrated design response to this prominent corner. We have chosen this building to design it distinguished while being one of a kind, while respecting the scale of building and rezoning guidelines and envisage downtown and Cleveland Avenue. I do not wish to replicate other recent building design in this area, but we are trying to create a distinctive response and introduce diversity of design while promoting architectural harmony along Cleveland Avenue. With respect to the material, I understand staff had some concern with respect to stucco, and I have no problem. I think it can be replaced by cementitious board or similar items. My basic response to this issue is the building has enough articulations, and I do not want to have any other material to make it more busy or too much. I felt something simple would better respond as a material. Building basically has 2 components. Basic base part of the building, which is in granite, is the commercial part, CRU at the lower floor and offices on the top. And the rest of the building setbacks to better explain about the corner plaza. Actually, about the corner plaza, we have setback, and I reduced the section that was connecting the 2 blocks intersect. I mean, one facing Winnipeg, the other one Cleveland. I reduced that section, but 2 problem happens when I canceled it. The 2 blocks was totally separate, and no tie between 2 blocks, and I felt that it's needed to be connected together. The other issue, which is maybe more important, the bylaw requires certain 30% of the commercial area as a part of the whole thing. If I cancel that part, the total area of the commercial will be below 30%. And I couldn't compensate for that loss of area anywhere else. That's why I kept it to some degree, and I think it will help for the look of the building. As far as the plaza is concerned, with respect to OCP section 38.10, we understand the intent of downtown corner plaza, considering seating and planting and interesting paving. I'm all for it, and I think it would be good. And I was actually discussing, trying to have a public art at that corner, to put it as a part of the design for this corner in the floor, which I think would be a good prominent section for something that will improve the location. It would be nicer if we have an art, public art design on the floor in this plaza. As far as the tandem parking is concerned, I felt that for the office building, having staff that they come and go together, maybe tandem would be helpful, because it's not like residential that you may come and go. The staff come together and it is not really causing too much problem. So it may be helpful to have some parking for staff in the office space, not for residential, because it doesn't work for residential, but for commercial, it may be helpful to have some tandem parking. As far as the Cleveland frontage is concerned, the intent was not to break the elevation too much. It has broken. It is reset a little bit, and it has a much bigger glazing, and it has a channel separating the commercial from the entrance. But I didn't see, I felt that if I make it more separate, the whole block will break and it becomes too busy. But it can certainly be, by changing of material, it can be implemented. As far as the amenity space, initially we had a smaller unit in different spaces, and when we discussed with the staff, we were discussed and says this is not going to work. So we need, we have 27 units, so 2 meters per unit, so we need 54 square meters, and that's what we have. And we have a space outside, as mentioned by Carrie. It's not really huge. It's about 5 feet long, but 5 feet deep, but about, I don't remember how big is it, but it meets the requirement, excuse me, as far as the square footage is concerned. 54 square meter has been met. And I think it's one rather good space for the resident to use. Other than that, I don't know. I'll point to add anything to.
Bobby, you have to come here.
Okay.
There's your presentation stuff is,
This one should be
that's the visual one, and that's the PDF.
okay. This is an animation of what we had. This is the entrance of the building, which is a bit separate actually from the rest of the commercial. Units mostly have balconies which they are covered. This is the top floor with some wood trellis. And this is the corner part that has a little bit of intrusion with glass into it. is the Winnipeg view, I mean the elevation from Winnipeg. And Winnipeg to Cleveland. You can see the corner and the entrance. Staircases are cladded with wood-like material. It's actually cementatious board, but it's textured and colored like wood. This is the parking, which has been covered with breathable green walls. It allows ventilation and it makes it green as well. So natural ventilation for parking. Now, I don't know if you need to go through. This is the project data. If you need anything extra, I don't want to take your time. You have the perspectives, site plan. This is the layout of the main floor, which is shows the commercial CRU and the parking, which is accessed through Loggers Lane. Upper floor, offices, units, and the amenity, the first immediate residential level over the parking. And basically we have typical floor plans on top, except for the very top unit, which has a larger unit here. Roof plan. This is the Cleveland elevation. With the colors, same elevation basically. Winnipeg with the color. And this is Logger Lane, south elevation and entrances to the parking. Color. And this is the east elevation with the color. A couple of sections. If I'm going too fast, let me know. And these are the colors and the materials. This, the lighting, a bit small, but we have wood look lighting at the street level with the sign. This is a bit too small, but we try to enlarge it a bit. So it is continually signs here, which meets the bylaw, with some lights next to each one of the units, entrances. Yes, yes, the soffits are all wood color material, but you can't only see it here, you have to see it in the perspective. The soffits that you can see in elevation, and it doesn't go up. Somehow the wheel doesn't work. Anyway. No, it doesn't go up. It just goes one way, I think. Where? Maybe here? No?
It looks like it's just frozen. Do you want to just exit it?
Sure. We can do it again. Yeah, these are what Bob mentioned. The wood that we have, it actually shows a lot more in perspective. The soffits.
On the right, top right.
Right, all these are. Anything else?
Just some specifics about the 5 points.
Well,
but
landscaping,
let them ask
and
the
yeah,
questions.
yeah. This is basically to reply, trying to keep it.
I think we should also note that for the plaza, the landscape architect hasn't designed a final thing because we're at zoning, but our intent is to keep it flexible because it might be that a corner tenant, like a restaurant or a cafe, comes in and they might want some seating. That's one thing. And the second thing is that we can keep the landscape, and as Farzin mentioned earlier, we are intending to have a public art piece, so there would be a whole competition and follow the district's rules on how we come up with the solution. I think the other thing too is that, as Farzin has said, we're not stuck on stucco. If you've been up to UBC and seen the village there are a lot of successful rain-screened hardy panel, not plank, but hardy panel that can be done in a range of colors, either light or dark. That would be a reasonable substitute if the panel felt that was a good choice.
Durable material.
Yeah, it's very durable. It's good for 7 years plus. So, yeah. And other than that, as far as he mentioned, that bottom right photo, what we tried to do there was to create the residential entry as a 2-floor space, and then so wider columns on either side and a cornice above. And then when you get the refined detail of the retail marching towards Winnipeg, it's finer columns, and also it's topped off with clear glass for the residential above and planting, so that distinguishes that frontage as well.
I think that's complete our presentation.
Thank
So
you.
I'm welcome to your questions, please.
Okay. So we will have a round of questions. Start with you, Jenna.
Sure. And could you speak a little bit more to the amenity space that's within the building?
Yes, absolutely. This is the space right next to the elevator, accessible to everybody, and have a strip of outdoor amenity next to it. This is 54 square meter, and we can put some, I think, wet bar or kitchen or something next to it, or part of it we need to have some washroom so they don't have to go out or something. But this is what the bylaw requires, all one big space.
Okay.
I think the other thing too we should note is that one of our challenges is that on Loggers Lane, when the owners bought the property, there was no registered right-of-way. So it was free and clear. Then, as they started to design, it was discovered there's a buried sanitary sewer that runs
Yes.
along Loggers Lane that's never been registered. So that immediately, plus the hydro, introduces setbacks that we have to deal with. So in order to break up the architectural design, plus try to meet some outdoor amenity space, we created, is it 5 feet wide?
Which one?
The
Yeah,
outside
that
portion.
is 5 feet wide.
So if you can imagine, on the outside, it breaks up the facade along Loggers Lake. That's one thing it does. The second is that for an area to come out from either sliding doors or whatever kind of doors, there's room for some seating, standing, if there's a function going on in the amenity room.
Yeah, that's a good point. We had to increase the setback from Logger Lane based on the discussion with engineering to 3.72 meter, which is more than 12 feet. So to meet the requirement because of the pipes that they were buried and we were not aware of it when we started the design. But the building has been pushed forward toward the Cleveland to allow for that setback.
With the overall form and character, could you speak a bit to the approach to having two quite different forms and characters with the top and the bottom, and sort of the intent with that?
Exactly, sure. The feel is, I wanted to have a very strong base, which is the commercial part, and then you have the very lighter, more approachable residential feel above that plate. So I wanted to have more formal feel for the commercial, and then more playful residential at the back.
Okay. Thank you. No more questions. Thanks.
Can I just begin here with a
Yep.
question for Carrie? I'm feeling like it's very presumptive that we're looking at this site as a C4 site before it even goes to rezoning. So I'm just curious, having advisory design panel going into such small detail as amenity and whatnot, perhaps we should be looking at this street on a wider scale and commenting on density and massing, how appropriate or inappropriate that is for that corner. Whether or not this is even going to get close to a C4 or possibly a CD zoning as it goes through process. But looking at the small details right now, we might be wasting a lot of time, so.
The applicant has applied as rezoning to a C4 zone, so it would not be a CD zone at this time. And we'd be presenting it with the C4. And why we wanted to bring this to the panel was because we feel that presenting this with the form and character that it presents and the massing that it presents, it doesn't comply to a lot of our DP guidelines. So we are concerned that that would impact the result of that rezoning. And so we wanted to hopefully resolve some of that so that it was bringing it more into compliance so that it wouldn't distract from the rezoning intention. And there are a
But I
lot
think
of
there's,
things as
there's
part
a
of.
good strong possibility that it won't even be considered for C4 in the end of the day. And I think that the panel here should take a viewpoint that our comments towards what could be appropriate density and massing in that particular site would be more valid and more interesting for our council to hear than the nuances of small details, which we will probably address if it comes back after the rezoning has occurred in context of however it's zoned.
A totally valid point. I hear exactly where you're coming from because you don't want to waste the panel's time and who knows what the outcome of the rezoning process will be. I think the thing to consider here though is that the rezoning application has its own public comment process, and so the comments about the rezoning, which is at the discretion of council and for consideration, should happen within that structure.
Yes.
This piece right here is about a bit of a look ahead to see how design panel respond to the DPA aspects, which is really the function of this panel and the scope of this panel is to comment on those specific pieces. And so the applicants, I think, and staff want some input on that key piece. The zoning has its own process that should be addressed there, but this time is really valuable to address that particular process or that particular part of the process. And while I totally hear what you're saying about the desire to respond to the rezoning, that really would have to happen in another channel, and we really want to use this piece to get as much as we can out of the DPA potential. Even though it may not come to pass, the function of this time has been set up to get that piece right now.
But that's exactly what I'm saying, is it's more valuable right now for us to take the context of the street and the massing and whatnot, which we are, is exactly within the jurisdiction of the advisory design panel.
For
And
sure.
those comments would
within
be,
the DPA, yeah,
Yeah.
within the DP comments.
yeah, and those comments would be much more valuable than for us to get into detail of what's happening inside the building at this point. So I think we might want to stick with that and the way that our review is going forward here, rather than how an amenity space operates or whatnot.
Right, yeah, and so the amenity space is a zone, a piece of the zoning, and so I can see that if it's not something that's contained in the DPA, some desire to stick to those DPA guidelines. So that, I think that's a valid point. Does that seem reasonable, Terry? But generally, we want to get that DPA commentary from this group at this point.
Yeah.
The intention was just highlighting a few of the pieces that weren't meeting those DPA guidelines that this committee could comment on. Massing and the form and character and how, as long as that is still something that you guys can have comment on, they are DPA guidelines. It does comply to the C4 zone other than 2 variances right at this time. So, we did work on that C4 zone and change what that massing is and having smaller massing and having certain percentages of commercial space in order to reach different FAR levels. So that's all written into the zone, and as Matt said, that's its own
But
process.
that's the presumption, though, that the C4 is what's being looked at here.
Yeah, so we have to kind of assume that, given that C4 gets accepted and this application comes to the panel as a C4 DPA application, that's the scope that we want to constrain this conversation to. So massing, great conversation. If it's about the density and those uses, we really need to channel that into the rezoning process, which is a separate process and not really within the scope of the panel. Does that make sense?
It can, but I'll suggest to
Sure.
my panel that the comments are more valuably taken, I think, in this context, looking at less of the detail and more at the bigger picture, and whether or not C4 is justified in this particular location. And I think it's valid for this panel to weigh in on that, because that's the ultimate question that's coming forward before this comes through for a DP application, is a rezoning. We're premature, but it just doesn't feel right to go into this whole session making a presumption that C4 is the appropriate
Always fun.
zoning for the site.
Totally get where you're coming from, but to get the maximum utility out of this for the reason that it's been brought together, it's to focus on those DPA guidelines. I hear what you're saying about not wanting to make a presumption, but the applicant's here to get that input based on that presumption.
Yeah.
So that's the staff perspective.
Graham.
Just my 2 cents, I think I would feel uncomfortable stating whether C4 is appropriate or not, given that's a decision of council, but I'm happy to comment on the massing of the form, which would inform that.
So that's that is exactly what
Yeah,
I mean.
yeah.
Whether it's appropriate or not is not the question.
Yeah.
But
So I'd agree.
what is mostly valuable at this point is the context of
Totally agree.
the neighborhood and the
Yeah.
massing, rather than the internal functions of the building at this point, because we will address those after we have seen what the zoning becomes.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments from board? Okay, we'll go around with questions again, starting at David.
Yeah, sure. Could you explain the design rationale behind the cornices?
Yes, that was part of it, to give a distinguished look to the building and have a bit of articulation without copying the rest of the design that is going on.
Okay. There's a variance for the setback, but I don't see any line shown on any sections or elevations to
Yes,
show
they
that
are in the
55
sections. Yes,
degree.
it meets the 45-degree lines. The only thing that it's intruding is the same cornices, actually. I can go into the, not in this one. It doesn't show here very well. We had this section.
I couldn't see
No,
one.
it doesn't show, but it is there. It is 45-degree. The only part that it intrudes is this corner. This cornice intrudes it. Otherwise, from here to here is 55-degree.
Okay.
Trust me, it does.
Could you speak maybe to the granite? Why the?
I sort of feel that it's squash because of the old rocks that we have, and it feels somehow strong and durable, and reminds me of the rocks around here.
Okay. The wood trellises, do you think they're appropriate for?
That was part of the, to tell you the truth, in response to the wood that it's in part of the bylaw and requirements, and I felt it gives a bit of a softer look to the building at the top. Just discussion. I mean, adding some wood, I think it is help softening the building.
Okay. The way the building is massed and stepped back, it creates kind of what I perceive a haphazard kind of ratio of patios. Can you speak? Some seem to be covered, some seem to be not covered, some seem to be 1,000 square foot, some to be
It's
2 foot
frozen.
wide. Could you speak to maybe
Sure.
how they're divided up?
Yes, these are actually all typical rhythm that is all equal. Most of the decks on the lower floor are covered, except very top floor.
Could you show the plan?
Yes, absolutely. This is the top floor, but this is the, okay, this is the typical floor. So the units have the decks that they are covered, and the corner unit has a bigger deck. Maybe I should go one floor lower and see if it moves. Okay, here. So we have 2 units toward Lager Lane with the deck, and then we have 4 toward Winnipeg, and 1 at the corner actually, and only 1 toward the Cleveland. It's
Could-
basically we was trying to recess because of the corner. That was the goal.
And then could you maybe speak to the green credentials? You noted that it's going to be a steel building. And it's green. Does that mean it's spray foam?
It is not 100% finalized. There was a discussion. It's good possibility to become steel, light steel structure. And I have done it before. There was always challenges with condensation more than the fire issues. The fire issue can be dealt with more or less. My concern is always with condensation with steel, especially when you have cantilever balconies. But we don't have cantilevers, we have posts, so I can somehow have the thermal break. But it's an issue that I have to deal with because that's one of the requirements of the client.
Okay. And would that mean that the building is then spray foam?
I think so. I think so. This is usually either spray foam or rigid insulation. We have to see which one is most viable.
You can still qualify for the local sign.
Yes, we are going to have the build green silver with the overall building.
Okay. Yeah, I have no more questions.
Thanks. Graham? Oh, sorry,
Can I
Carrie.
just clarify one point? There was just a point that was made around the trellis and that there was a requirement that wood was in our zoning, and we don't have a requirement.
Yeah.
So it's not.
Just to clarify.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Graham?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. First, maybe just ask staff to clarify. I understand at the base of the building in the public realm what's going on Cleveland and the importance of that, but can you just tell us a bit about Loggers Lane and what the future of Loggers Lane looks like?
That always seems to be a good question that comes up with developments along this between Cleveland and Loggers. At this time, we are operating with trying to put sidewalks in where we can on the west side, and we have a very narrow right-of-way. We have 11 meters for a road right-of-way there, and we don't have anything secured for the rail line, so that is still under works and under visioning. So right now,
Sorry, the rail line?
the old BC rail line that is along the east side of Loggers Lane. So currently, we're just working with trying to promote pedestrian accessibility where we can, also needing to ensure that we have vehicle movement on Loggers Lane. So at this time, this is, we're going to probably try to work with what we have there as a right-of-way, essentially a right-of-way that we're going to require as part of this rezoning in order for the, the sewer line that's underneath there. And with that, we'll see if we can put some trees, if not, depending on the alignment of that sewer line. If not, it's likely that it's just going to be a paved surface so that we can promote pedestrian accessibility.
Okay, like on the sidewalk maybe. Okay,
Yeah.
but there's no sort of larger visions or anything like that from the OCP?
No, I mean, we do have, I believe there is a guideline that suggests we try to.
I can speak to it if you'd like.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So the one guideline for Loggers says buildings along the east side of Cleveland Ave should make provisions for secondary frontages along Loggers Lane. These secondary frontages should follow the guidelines specified in DPA 3. So there's an interest in trying to achieve frontages along that line. There's some real challenges, as Carrie highlighted, and so we haven't articulated a defined vision for that corridor because there are some issues that have yet to evolve in terms of land availability to the district. So that's a somewhat high-level attempt to
Okay.
address that in the interim until there's a better vision articulated.
Okay, All right, I'm just trying to understand the blank wall on the back, and if there's opportunities in a discretionary process to shape that a little bit, I think that would be great. So second question to the applicant, just trying to understand the decisions with the massing and the step backs and kind of the outdoor indoor space, those are the questions. So just those step backs, can you just describe a little bit about your design decisions? I didn't see much in the report. Or your presentation on the amount that it steps back. You mentioned that 50% angle, but is that driving it? What's driving it?
From the Loggers Lane or from the Cleveland?
Yeah, it's quite a generous step back. So
Yeah,
what,
from the Loggers Lane.
no, from Cleveland, so,
Oh, Cleveland?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a 55-degree angle that pushes the building further back.
and that's a requirement of the district.
That's right.
Okay, okay, all right.
But we were really forced because of the Logger Lane and the BC Hydro requirements, because there is a big cable going back there.
Right.
And the cable, and the sewage line, which is inside the property. So by the time we cut it for the foundation, it should be far enough so it doesn't damage the pipes.
Okay. And the plaza, which I agree, you know, it looks like it needs some work. You are still doing further work
Yes.
with your landscape architect to further develop that as a public space. Okay.
It's on private property, but it will be for public use
Yeah.
if we can.
Right, okay. Just last question, so it mentions LEED. Do you know what level of certification you're going for?
Yes, certification
Green, build green silver.
silver.
Build green, silver?
Silver.
Yeah.
Not LEED? It mentions LEED and build green. Okay, friendly. Okay. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Most of my questions have been asked, but you mentioned a different material than stucco at the UBC campus. Can you just describe what is that material? It's like a panelized?
It's, yeah, so if you remember, when it first came out, Hardy Panel was just like for single-family homes. But then they applied them to mixed-use buildings. More recently, in the last 5 to 7 to 10 years, they came up with a panelized system where it's different. It can be different widths and heights, but it is in a piece, not horizontal, more vertical.
Right.
And they use a strapping to hide where it's connected.
So there'd be trim pieces around.
Yeah, it's
from
a
panel.
Yeah,
it's
it
a
can be.
trim and panel, or there are so many different products these days. Actually, yesterday
true.
I was in the TTMAC, and there are so many new products that provide panels, and they are very durable. I'm very much into having this maintenance-free or low-maintenance finishes for the elevations, because this is going to stay there, and we don't want to spend money and time of the resident to keep maintaining the elevation. So there are so many. Hardy Panel is one of the readily available, and cost is very cheap. It is a trim.
Yeah.
But there are so many new products.
Certainteed is another one.
Certainty is another one.
Yeah.
They're all coming, and I think they're wonderful materials.
Yeah, great for this kind of climate, especially in the winter.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking. I think we're on the same page there. So if you were to use that panelized system with trim pieces, do you think that would add to the busyness of the overall
You know,
facade?
I'm trying to make it as least busy as possible. I'm trying, because these panels are big. Some of them are 9 or 10 feet long, but 3 meter long. So we try to minimize. Actually, I was talking to them yesterday if I can miter joint them. So even at the joints, I don't want to see easy trims, to have as least possible interruptions. That's the goal. That's why I said stucco, because stucco have minimum joints.
The cornices, do they serve any other purpose other than just being
No, it's
sort of
just
an
an overhang,
architectural
just
element?
for the rain, and some, just overhang, but not in a normal overhang style.
And was it a request of like the client, or is that something that?
Sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, they like this style.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Sarah?
I don't have any questions.
Oh,
Oh, sorry.
Hiding the corner.
yeah.
So from a public art perspective,
Right.
what is happening on the street around that space from the neighborhood? And also just what kind of art would you consider in there that's beyond just taking out of, rock or bronze and kind of setting it down in the plaza that would make the space attractive and interactive?
Yeah, I think, I'm ignorant of this. Do you have like a guidelines of a competition that you usually do? Or do you let the developer
She's-
look after?
I'm probably not the right
So
person to
these,
ask on that.
there is a public art selection committee that
Perfect.
you can come
Yeah.
to and
Yeah,
consult with us for that aspect of it. I was just wondering what amount of space, because you were talking about possibly hiving off a piece for a potential restaurant or whatever, but how much would you allow for a public space that people could come and sit or interact with or play chess or whatever that is a piece of art?
you got the landscape plan. The first thing that the landscape architect has done is to, in conceptual, is to use the paving, change of pavers. I think she's done a circular design.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And landscape plan should be there. Colored ones that she did, 2 pages.
It's in the, it's in the.
Might be at the
Oh,
very
okay. Sorry.
So just to
Yeah.
answer your question, first of all, obviously we
The
were.
pavers are there,
Yep.
okay?
That's part of it.
Good.
Planting, she has an
Excellent.
idea for. The other is open, so we haven't said, oh, we'll put a piece here or whatever. That's why I was saying that it's important we come to your committee
Yeah,
and find out, what direction we should take, what space should be allocated. Obviously, who would, be invited to say we can do an artistic piece, whether it's First Nations
yeah.
or something more local or wherever it is. We haven't put any thought into that yet. We're open to
I
it.
did think about it.
Oh,
but-
okay.
I thought you were thinking about it, but I just wondered how much space would be allowed, given it is a tight corner, and there's a lot of need allowances for pedestrian, et cetera.
Right.
But also then take the realm inside the atrium as well, an internal atrium, so that public art goes external and internal.
You're thinking about the 3D art. I'm thinking about the flats.
Well, there's both, yeah,
Mhm.
I was thinking of a very
like a mosaic.
colorful mosaic,
Yeah,
beautiful with the, I was thinking of the native, but it could be anything.
yeah.
To cover, not to take space, but it would be, I think everybody looks at it and stays there for years and years. That's
Yeah.
what I envisage.
And we do have pieces of mosaic around the top, but I just wondered how much space was.
Yeah, can I ask that we just have a response to the size of the space? and
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Keep the conversation at a
That's
high
all
level
I'm
rather
asking.
than the
Yeah.
detail.
Sure. I'm trying to see, there is a dimension somewhere, I'm not good at. This is about 9 meters across. The
Almost
the
30
diameter.
30 feet.
And that's not taking into account the sidewalk allowances?
Yeah, it does, it was always.
So the sign,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, everything is about 9 meters.
Yeah, and there is an opportunity there. I know there's glass, but certainly ones I've been involved in, you can go right up the building, as you were talking about,
That's
either with,
Okay,
tiles or something, and that would be part of the discussion definitely now.
thank you.
Thank you.
I have no question.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Carlos?
Can you let me know, for the last page, A6.1, for the shadow study, what software did you use to model that?
Revit.
Revit? And do you have like Squamish's topography data?
Yes, absolutely. It's almost flat, but we did, yes.
I mean, for the surrounding mountains.
Yes, that's right, we did. This is exactly what the mountains are there.
Okay. Maybe a question for staff. Just as far, like, I see there's 2 DPA guidelines that we're talking about with relationship to the plaza space. Could you elaborate just a bit kind of on one of your first points that it doesn't meet the guideline? And when I look at the two guidelines that reference it, if it is the size, like the 9-meter size that's been stated, is there something that says that we need more, or the district can require more, or is it more just like aspiration that the plaza was larger or more significant from the district's perspective?
Yeah, so there's a whole section, it's under 3810 on corner plazas, and 38.9A is just supposed to be that is an actual diagram to say that it is that is a prominent corner plaza. And then the 3810 is the details around what the corner plaza is. C speaks to specific design considerations, and that's kind of where I was getting into and wanted the panel to speak to whether that, and specifically around, does that shift the massing of this area and how that looks, not really the specifics of put a mosaic or put a chessboard, but more how that massing feels to help achieve that objective.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So I guess it's a rezoning, not a development permit, but I see that currently there's been no rainwater or stormwater management considered. Is it the intent to deal with that at DP? Is that, yeah, okay. Did you look at moving the sewer line? Just
No.
thinking like as far as buildable area goes.
I think it should go all along the Loggers Lane. It would be tremendously expensive.
Huge cost.
It's huge cost.
Yeah. And plus there's above that, there's an oversized DC hydro transmission
Yeah.
line.
Right,
And
So
then
it's a double
more
whammy.
than one pipe. It is maybe 3 pipes done.
gotcha.
Or 2.
At any point in this design, did you explore having the frontages look different beyond just the spacing of the columns? I know you referenced that, but did you look at materials or anything for the commercial frontages specifically along Cleveland Avenue?
I mean, you mean Cleveland versus entrance or Cleveland?
Even as on a larger block, and not to say this is too large, but you would see sometimes different treatments on the ground floor to distinguish between two separate parts, or just to basically break up that massing along the street edge?
To tell you the truth, I'm trying to avoid making it too busy. I want to have a simpler look at the base of the building, something strong and heavy.
Okay,
That was the intent.
okay, that's all my questions, thank you.
Thanks, Carlos.
So I think this is a question for Carrie, and I think it's sort of what you were alluding to earlier, and being new at this panel. Has the C4 zoning, is that sort of a generally accepted suggestion for this particular parcel in the OCP? Is that sort of where, yeah,
Yeah,
so no
our,
matter what
our
comes
land,
up?
yeah, our land use plan speaks to this type of form. And we recently went through a large redo of the C4 zone specifically on the Cleveland
Okay.
frontage. It was a 2-year process with public consultation, and this is kind of what we ended up with. It doesn't mean that this particular design is what it
Sure,
needs to be,
yeah.
but there were specific things like stepping back so that we can have a little bit more light onto the street. Things like reducing the massing, so meeting massing to the FAR has to match how much commercial they provide, because we're trying to provide more commercial on our Cleveland frontage. We have a regulation in that zone that speaks to breaking up frontages, things like that came out.
So
of
not
that.
just for a corner parcel, but basically, you know, anywhere along the street is where?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. I had questions about that blank wall, but I think that's sort of been answered, that that's sort of up in the air at the moment in terms of Loggers Lane. The street trees and the planting along the street, I noticed that it's only proposed on one side, is it? Is that just because there isn't enough room on Winnipeg, or is that just not a requirement from the district to have street trees on that street, just on Cleveland? Is that, that would be?
No, I think that's just maybe a miss to not have that. There is
Okay.
a requirement to have street trees on that street. Just
Okay.
Just me.
Yeah,
There's
there
no
are-
trees showing on the
It doesn't show trees.
Yeah, Winnipeg.
Yeah, I don't think we've looked into at this point with the rezoning.
That's
That's
much
definitely
detail,
a later
yeah.
stage of
Sure.
where we get to with that, but
Yeah.
they would be required to put
Yeah.
that, and we'd probably look at what that cross section, or what those widths really need to be, and
Sure.
though there should be more space
Yeah.
to add that.
Okay. The other question I had, so just to be clear, where the entrance is not where the plaza is, correct? The entrance
That's
is
right. No, the
along
entrance to the
Cleveland.
residential units, you mean? It's at the
For
Cleveland.
either, so where are all the entrances? There's one on
For the
Cleveland.
for the commercial units?
For any, all entrances, where are they?
You can see, this is the entrance to the, I don't know if you can, this corner here
Yeah,
is the entrance to the residential unit,
okay,
and these are all entrances that
Individual
can be,
entrances to
can be
retail.
divided,
Got
can
it.
be all together, it just
yeah,
depends.
okay. So there's no sort of central,
No.
I thought I saw lobby written somewhere, but I think
No,
that's
this is the lobby
Okay.
for the residential.
for residential.
That's
Okay.
right,
Okay, so that's sort of a primary, secondary kind of.
yeah.
Okay, and then you also mentioned that the public art plaza could also possibly work as a cafe seating or something. So I'm just curious how that will work, how you would maintain it as sort of a common area if it's being used by a private business.
I don't see any I don't know if legally it has any issue.
Normally what would happen is you do a commercial strata for both the offices above and the retail at grade, and that'll be common area because it's on private property. So anything that's put in, whether it's art or let's say a lessee for a cafe or something, puts seating out there, there'd be a restrictive covenant, and there'd also be within the strata bylaws who looks after it, making sure it's clean and everything's removed for
Right.
nighttime and so on and so forth. Yeah.
And would that preclude it from complying with the development permit guidelines then? If it all of a sudden isn't common, it's now at least as a
Shouldn't.
private?
I mean, the idea, if I understand correctly too, is to animate the street. And that's one way of doing it for sure, is to have outdoor seating.
Right. Okay.
I can speak to that a little bit further. Let me just refresh my memory on.
I can ask my other question.
Sure, go ahead,
That's the last one, I think. It looked like there's planting on the upper levels.
Yeah, that's right.
Is it intended to be a green roof or are they containers?
Up here,
Yeah,
yeah, it can be either because it's concrete.
right,
I'm a bit opposed of having green roof on the wood structure,
yeah.
but this is concrete floor, so
Okay, so it
either
could
can
be.
work. Yeah.
Okay, that's it for me.
Okay, thanks. Carrie, did you want to add in?
Yeah, so we do have a guideline in our development permits, guidelines of 3811, privately owned public space, and B speaks to privately owned public space should have a public right of way, register on title to ensure public access at all times. So we do have that, it's a guideline, and we've used it in different cases where it's more applicable. At this point, it's something we haven't considered this, but it could be. Okay, so it'd be a
Actually,
time
I
to
do
consider
have one
that.
more question.
Mm.
Ask it. Is there any consideration for employee housing or employee restricted housing here for the residential, or is it all market? Yeah.
Condo?
Okay. I'm not going to ask any questions because I've already asked my main question. So we'll go to comments, and I'm hoping that we can move around the table a little more quickly this time, if possible, and we'll start with Jenna.
Okay, so the form and character, you had mentioned that you were hoping that your building would stand out. I think there's a really lovely vernacular that's being developed in Squamish. And there's a lot of really great buildings that we can look to for that. And unfortunately, I think that this form and character is just very different from the Squamish look. It feels maybe a bit more California than Squamish, and I would encourage as this project moves forward to look at a form and character that is reflective of Squamish, and I think there's ways to find a creative individual voice to the building while still maintaining that form and character that's been created in the district overall. I think that the frontages definitely could benefit from more of a human scale. It feels very big, almost Greek, like a Greek Gothic scale, Greek scale. But it could lend to a bit more of a human scale and some differentiation between the three streets. I think that Loggers Lane also deserves some consideration for a bit more articulation rather than a blank wall. Even if it is a blank wall, it can be a really interesting blank wall. Materials, I think it's an interesting consideration for granite. I would encourage a selective use of a material of that type because it lends for a very heavy feeling building. And I would give some consideration to it feeling like one building rather than two. It really feels like two distinct different buildings, and I would encourage consideration for more of one. For the main plaza, from a massing perspective, I think it would be really positive for the building to really feel like it's a part of the plaza and the two are really speaking together rather than kind of fighting each other. And with that plaza space, I would really encourage that if there's areas in which are being utilized for the building's purpose, for example, a patio, that space isn't taking away from what was intended to be a very public plaza use. So maybe finding an opportunity for both public and private to integrate together, but not lose the square footage of the public usable space. I really appreciate that there's some green sustainability initiatives on the project, and I really encourage you to really push those as much as possible. It's particularly with Urban Heat Island, rainwater management, really thoughtful use of materiality, etc. And that goes to street trees as well. I think the streetscape needs to definitely, as it moves forward, this is another detail, but really be mindful of that as well. I think I'll pass it over because I'm sure
I think personally the massing is just a little bit inappropriate and a bit too busy for such a special corner. I believe the materials, the stucco and even the granite are just too large a departure from the vernacular. I wouldn't personally support the columns and the cornices as it's, again, too far removed from reaching, architectural harmony. You mentioned a unique design in your comments, but you also mentioned architectural harmony. I think unique architecture has to be sort of really exceptional, but all architecture must respect its surroundings as well as the DP requirements for preserving like the historic character and identity of Cleveland, which is really important on this street in particular. It's such a prominent corner defined by the OCP that it's going to come under sort of increased scrutiny. I think the fact that it's flagging so many DPA requirements shows that it's maybe not being sensitive enough, personally. I don't really think the tandem parking works for me. I don't arrive at the same time as my employees and they don't all leave together, so I think it's going to set up conflict and remove functionality for the actual office space. The amenity space as well, the north deck amenity space is unusable in my sort of opinion, especially when a 6-story building could get put next to it. I just feel that this overriding design style has been sort of shoehorned into the Squamish OCP and the design guidelines, and it's causing a lot of conflicts with other sort of items. I really want to see a landmark and special building in this sort of prominent location, but I'd urge the applicants to reconsider this design through the lens of Squamish, and especially as this could end up at a public open house, and I've been to those before, so that would be my advice.
Great, thanks. I'll go quickly through staff's questions, agree with everything previously said. I think there's some work to be done to make sure that this responds to the local character of Squamish and of the neighborhood. I think the two major moves you could do, as stated, is simplifying the massing and changing the use of columns and cornices, and perhaps doing more horizontal expressions. And I think on a corner site, you have an opportunity to make a stronger statement. So I think simplifying that massing, which I think is just trying to do too much. Materials, I'm glad that you've considered the change of materials from stucco, which I don't think is appropriate in this climate, and weather. So something like hardy panel would certainly be more durable and would not put a future strata at risk of liability. The plaza corner, I think there's a lot more to do there. Your landscape plan should go in concert with your rezoning, and the way it's massed and framed, it's really not an inviting spot. Just the way it's framed, let alone what actually occurs in that space. And it needs to be more than just public art, seating, etc. And I would say most certainly to staff and the applicant, it needs an SRW across the space to maintain it as public. Tandem parking, agreed. I've never seen that work well anywhere in the examples I've looked at. Cleveland frontage generally looks okay. I'm fine with the entrances. I'm more concerned about Loggers Lane, so I encourage, you've already got that setback. Please put a sidewalk there so people can traverse the site. And amenity space, I agree, it's not usable as currently. Those are my comments.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, pretty much what everyone else has already said. I think the big one for me is the top and bottom look like two completely different buildings, to the point where when I was looking at this last night, I actually thought that the white was a building behind the grayer lower base of the building. Like, it looks completely separate. So maybe trying to tie those in some way so they don't look that off. I think being on the corner it's on, it should really attempt to fit in with the Squamish aesthetic much more than it's attempting to at the moment. I think if you were to eliminate the stucco, with the panels that you're talking about, you might be forced into a busier facade than you already have. You were mentioning you're trying to keep it from being too busy, but to me it looks really, really busy. I think the cornices add to that, and I think the cornices look pretty odd. I don't think they fit in much. Would encourage eliminating them or something else. Trying to come up with a reasonable solution for that. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thanks. Jackie?
Thank you for your presentation. Echoing some of the similar comments, the building in and of itself should be public art. It should also respect the space in which the rest of the streetscape is going to surround it, and be a landmark as people want to go there. So just encouraging the same comments that came before. And my biggest comment is about the public space, that it be held as public space for the most part, and be made interactive as an attractor on a streetscape that's going to be quite busy. Thank you.
I'll just echo what everybody else had to say. I find this building to be extremely busy, distracting almost. I think stucco isn't appropriate in this climate. Loggers Lane needs more attention. The tandem parking isn't, I don't think will work that well. Additionally, there should be some consideration that if there is the need for accessible commercial parking, that's available. Just as a small comment on interior, a 1.1 meter hallway is not accessible. Yeah, need to do a little bit more work.
Good. Great, thank you. I guess I'll start by saying that C4 as a zone is a challenge with the changes that the district made. I think that probably should be acknowledged. Like, this is a good test case. We have a challenging situation in our downtown with our not able to build parkades unless they're at great expense. So I get that, and that's why I was surprised you went for C4 in the rezoning. I would have maybe gone the direction of a comprehensive development zone that better suits the specifics of this location. I would really recommend that you check that you have your topography information is correct for these shading models, because having just worked on a bunch of shading studies, and if you look at the December 21st model, the chief doesn't really look like that. So I think there's something that's gone wrong in that importing that data, and I'd just have a second look at that so that it doesn't flag for anyone. I think it's fine for the visual as you're flying around to see the mountain at the background at a certain scale, but for the shading, it doesn't really ring true with the reality. Agree on the crown molding. I'd like to see the next iteration come back without that, or just another way to get that same flare. I think it's challenging to put that much commercial in a lot of this size and then get enough units to carry it. We're seeing a change in the way that commercial is being priced in town, so hopefully that's a positive, but it's going to be challenging to make it work as designed. Yes, all good comments. That's me.
Thanks for your presentation. So I think I echo all of the other comments that we've heard around the table. I find that when I look at this building, or I get this feeling that there are two distinct buildings, or there's one in front and one behind, and it's not really integrated. And going from the dark to the light is also a very, it just looks like it's two pieces rather than one. It's severe, and I'm not sure that's really what a landmark building in that location should be conveying. And the materials, echoing everyone else's comments. Plaza Corner, I feel like as it's shown, a bit small. It could use some green, and could be softer and more inviting. I also see potential problems with the tandem parking. On the frontage, I'd like to see more green, of course. I'd like to see trees down Winnipeg, which it sounds like we do. Focusing more on a human scale. And then making the corner sort of more welcoming and directional almost, because it is the entrance to town. And then for the amenity space, you might want to consider something that is indoor and outdoor. So it has the option of there being an indoor space, but then it opens to an area that's maybe covered, or a patio or something. That might work better. That's it for me.
Thanks. Those are all great comments, which I agree with. Prior to me, I just feel that the biggest point here is that in a wider context of the street and what's happening on Cleveland Avenue and what's been identified in the OCP as a very special site, in terms of, and just reading through your comments here, consider opportunities, sites, and designs for major downtown public plaza. May not be there, but that is a pretty major corner. It's been identified that. We know that there's huge potential there, and in the method of doing a rezoning, that's where we might realize something special on this site. And particularly as I look at this, it looks to me very much like another C4 building. It could be appropriate mid-block, but I think the massing is far too heavy on the street end, which is Winnipeg, I believe. And then the attention to detail on the southeast corner, which is Sluggers Lane, is just not there, and it really needs to be. There's also the entire possibility that the community might say, hey, we thought this would be a commercial-only building on this site. And so there's no way of telling, I guess, as we go through the rezoning process, what the community or what the council are going to dictate in this regard or ask for, but I'm not sure how we get to the point right now where someone's done a whole bunch of work assuming that it's C4, and who's been making sort of that hey, it's okay to bring a C4 to us answer. It seems like we've awkwardly gone through a process here that really isn't very mindful of the OCP and the special nature of this corner site, and the special opportunity that we have in that it's a C2 needing a rezoning. So I would have liked to have seen ADP be approached with a different set of questions in that regard. That's my only comment. But with that said, we don't vote on this one as far as bringing it back or anything else. So these are just comments that are I would imagine to be used. Carrie might want to comment on that, how we handle this.
I think I did make I tried to edit the potential recommendations, but it's okay, there's no need for that. I think we wanted to get the comments.
Yeah.
I'll just speak to the fact that everyone has the right to have a property and to rezone it whatever they choose to. So the fact that they've chosen
Attempt to
C4
rezone it.
Yes, correct, and they can go through that process accordingly.
Mhm.
It's not to staff's discretion to say, no, you can't do that. We recommend things, but they can choose to proceed with the C4 if they want. It's up to council to make that final decision. So I'm really grateful to get some of these comments early on so that they feel more informed around the design of that building moving forward. Just also to note that applicants can also make a rezoning application and a DP application at the same time, which these applicants have expressed they want to do
Mhm.
and are moving towards. So we really wanted to get this insight before they went ahead and created full packages for their DP.
But that would come again as a DP to ADP, I would
Correct.
imagine.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. And at that point, then we'll vote on our alternatives, and so we won't need to do that today. Okay, well, thanks very much. And I think we'll take a 10-minute right now, if that's okay with everyone. Hey everyone, welcome back to ADP. We're going to move to business item number 2, which is the DP 517 at 38012 3rd Avenue. And I'll hand over to our planner, Carrie Hamilton.
Hi everyone again, Carrie Hamilton. I'm planning for the District of Squamish. So I'm here today presenting a development permit this time for a mixed-use building located at 38012 3rd Avenue. And the proposed development is offering 67 purpose-built rental units to be secured under a housing agreement, along with 437 meters squared of ground floor commercial space. So the property does fall into DPA 3 universal guidelines and DPA 5 commercial center guidelines. The development is proposing multiple variances. One is to increase the height of the structure by 1.09 meters. They are also looking for, sorry, this percentage is a little off because they've changed that percentage, but a reduction in the commercial space from the required 20% to 8.8%. No loading bay. A parking variance is of 3 commercial stalls. And they are also looking for this panel's review on if they should have an indoor and outdoor amenity space, which would require a variance, or to put a full amenity space as per our zoning, indoor amenity space as per our zoning. So they wanted to get your comments on that. So due to the development's 100% rental dedication, the project is considered a priority project. And under our district priority project policy, they only have to come to ADP once. So this is your chance to comment. And this project has not previously come to this panel before. So staff are generally supportive of the design and are seeking ADP's review and recommendations regarding the proposed variances and the north facade material, the massing, the overall building massing in relation to upper story setbacks. And that's really, we have a lot of development permit guidelines. They are guidelines, but a lot of them do not speak to the elevations and the massing that they have proposed here. So just want to get ADP's comments and feel around, what guidelines are really important to follow and which ones we're okay not following. And then we also wanted to get the urban heat effect mitigation component and the north pedestrian pathway. So if you move in your report a little further into departmental comments, I have 5 comments for review. So one of them is the variances, as I said before, to see if, there's a lot of them. So just wanted to see if we can all support them and find their support for all of them. The other one is the north facade materials and massing. So DPA speaks to kind of a human scale development, avoiding monotonous walls and upper story, stepping back to reduce massing. And staff are just wondering if this particular elevation is really not meeting that and could meet that a little bit more. the north pathway. So staff have concern around the 1.5 meter pathway that they have between the buildings. We have along with that, the corner plaza, we also have mid-block walkways as part of that map. And this is not an actual mid-block walkway. It's not intended to be there. And what we want to move away from is having these tiny pathways between buildings that in the interim will kind of be very narrow pathways. And then say if another build out happens and another 1.5, that 3 meters is not really particularly, can't be useful as much. So a typical mid-block walkway that we're looking for is a 5 meter gap between them to really support pedestrian safety and support kind of usability and functionality of that space. So you could almost have windows and have storefronts look out to those areas. And with this particular setback, you can't. So we do have regulation or guidelines in our development permit guidelines that speak to safety. And that's where I flagged this one. There is obviously some concern because it's right beside a residential home. So there are some challenges with that, but maybe there are some ways in which the building could push to the lot line in some areas. This would require a variance, so staff are willing to support that, but would like to get panels review on that. The urban heat, we are in a climate emergency, and our council is really looking at how to ensure that these buildings that we are approving and reviewing are going to address a lot of our energy efficiency guidelines. We do have one guideline that speaks to that urban heat effect, and staff are just wanting to get the panel's comments around the use of the dark gray kind of metal and how that will affect that urban heat. And the last piece is the upper story setback and massing. So we do have regulation or guidelines and that speak to trying to step back. I know that there's been a number of instances where it's appropriate not to have those step backs. Staff are feeling that this could be one of them, but also would like to get this panel's review on maybe where they could include that, or also to hear if the committee is supportive of what they've proposed, regardless of the guideline. So that's it for me, and then I think the landscape architect has to take off to another meeting. So they're going to do a presentation for you. They'll do architecture and landscape, and then maybe what we'll do is just if anyone has any particular landscape comments, to say those first, so that the landscape architect can leave afterwards. Questions, not comments, sorry. If there's any questions, and then we'll go through the regular comments round afterwards. Good?
Yep, thank you.
Over to you guys.
Thank you. So thanks for having us. My name is Taizo Yamamoto with Yamamoto Architecture.
Meredith Mitchell at M2 Landscape Architecture.
And my name is Ed Collett, the developer, Dayton Avenue Development Group.
Is it possible to lower the light a little bit? So, as mentioned, this is a purpose-built rental building, and we are in discussion with BC Housing as well, so that will help run the development and administer the building. So our priority here is to provide the most number of rental units that are possible on the site. So that's driven a lot. So that's driven a lot of what our design direction has been, and also some of the variances that we're asking for. So we are providing 67 units, and we are pushing on the family unit size over 50%. And then we do have 2 levels of parking, and we are asking for a variance. The way it's changed slightly since the submission is that we are providing 3 commercial, 6 payment in lieu, so the 3 that are being reduced would be for the residential. So the numbers are the same, but the breakdown is slightly different. And then the other variance we're looking at is the reduction in commercial percentage and also the loading requirement. But we'll get into that as we go through this. So the site is on a corner. There's a recent 6-story building across 3rd Avenue that's nearing completion, if not already complete. And then a mix of single-family homes, some apartments, 4-story scale. So it's a little bit mixed. This is in the downtown area, but it's sort of a transitional zone between a bit more residential character
heading towards the more commercial. So this shows kind of some of the context and the scale of single family. On the top right is immediately adjacent to our site. It's worth mentioning that those two lots have recently been consolidated. So to go back to this context map, those in blue is recently been consolidated. So the understanding is that that would be developed at likely to 4 stories, if not higher. And then this is the building across the street. So also similar kind of scale, flat roof in this case. So I think when this building was done, there was slightly different qualification on height, and height could be extended with additional energy performance. So that was done in this case, but that's not really applicable anymore. And again, just some kind of context, you know, the incredible views even from street level that are possible here. So for us, we do a lot of projects in the Lower Mainland in Vancouver, and you know, Squamish, obviously the history is quite interesting, but also the requirements for the floodplain and the difficulty in doing below-grade parking. So for us, this kind of suggested an opportunity to think of the building differently and maybe go to the, you know, Squamish's history as an inspiration, and this idea of, you know, the mining and the forestry that kind of helped found the city. So, you know, our diagram was, you know, something has to come out of the ground to support the parking, the commercial, and that's our concrete base, which is sort of the mine notion. And then the mill is the piece that sits on top, which is the wood frame construction, the simple form. And it allows us to kind of separate the volumes and articulate them because the functions are different, the construction is different. And it also, you know, we feel like a simple form is appropriate because it's the most efficient building envelope, and it also kind of brings back that pitched roof form, which is, you know, more of the historic base of Squamish. But also bringing in a more contemporary language. So the materiality is very important. So the concrete is expressed as concrete, board form, so there's texture to it, there's some richness to it. The Corten steel kind of refers to the old ruins, the rusted tools, like all of this sort of artifacts of these areas. And then wood is used as an accent material. So the main building form is a black corrugated or dark gray corrugated, which kind of creates a quiet, simple form, or expresses the form and allows those other materials to be accents and kind of give the building richness. So this is sort of our precedent, you know, it's simple forms, like very simple detailing, robust materials, but the combination is what gives it interest. In terms of our site plan, to the north is Third, so we try to wrap the retail as much as we can around the streets. The lane is on the bottom of the page. So even though the retail area is not extremely large, we are trying to maximize its frontage. And then the residential entry is tucked in off of Third Avenue. So just a bit more detail. We are providing, you know, the city required streetscape, including the boulevard, and then a bike lane would be incorporated as well. And then just to highlight this notion of this walkway, so our intent here is to avoid another variance. So we are setting back that, but it's not intended to be public. It's a maintenance pathway. But it's also one of the few places on our site where we don't have building. So it is a place where we have permeability. We could potentially locate some of our stormwater detention in that zone, but it's not intended to be public. So those gates on either side would close that off. It wouldn't be a thoroughfare. But it would also allow, you know, access for window washing on the upper floors and just general maintenance. So on the second level, again, because we're trying to maximize units, we have to fit our parking. We have a second level parking above the retail. And then we get into the wood frame floors. So, you know, wood frame construction on the 6 floors, the shear walls, the stacking is really critical. And we're also trying to make use of the depth of the site by having more of like studio type apartments. So we can bring the unit sizes down, make them a bit more affordable, get more units, but also kind of keep the form simple. And then, of course, the 2 beds, the larger units around the corners where there's more exposure. So 4th and 5th, similar plan. And then on the 6th level, on that south corner is where we're proposing the indoor-outdoor amenity. And that's where the building carves away a little bit to express that, but we'll describe that in our variance request. And then the 6th level, we're proposing a mezzanine, which allows us to create 2-bedroom units where those 1-bedroom stacks are. So also, maximizing the building volume to create more bedrooms and more units. And then that northern side, on the right side of the page, is where that pitched roof form stops and it allows us to step down to help our transition to the neighbor. And so that you can see in the roof form here. So the elevations kind of express that mill sitting on top of the mine, and then this Corten, rhythm of Corten steel fins, which create some warmth and also interest in terms of shadowing, screening for parkade. And then the frontage on 3rd to show the extent of the commercial. And then these drawings differ a little bit from what's in your package, and now we've shown the gate to show that that frontage is actually continuous to the property line. So that's the intent. The intent is not to have a walkway. And then the lane side. And then the north side is quite simple, but like I say, we are expecting a development to happen on the other side. The blank wall would be planted. Again, we have that permeable area to actually have in-ground native planting, so we would propose that the planting could help to screen that wall in the interim. And then just some notions of signage and how to kind of make the entry a bit special. What we're thinking is we could have a giant cut of a log section that's cast into the concrete. So you have the board form pattern, but then you also see kind of the rings of the log actually imprinted into the concrete. And then use the Corten material and the signage for the building, but also for the shop signage. So lighting would be a combination of essentially step lighting set into the base of the building, so it would illuminate the sidewalk, with a few areas of uplighting for features in that entry area, and then on that piece of Corten wall opposite the bike facility, which I don't have it. Oh, there it is, in this area over here. So the sections, so here we can see our proposal on the right versus what's being built across the street, and we do ask for a slight variance in height. With a pitched roof, it's measured to the middle of our roof, and so this kind of shows it. We are slightly over, but then if you look at this edge of our building, the eave is actually quite a bit lower than what would be possible with a flat roof building. So in terms of, maybe that'll go back into it. So then this is the overall view of the building, and that eave, you can see, pushes the actual wall down versus what might be possible if we did a flat roof out to the edge of the building. And here, this kind of really shows the idea of expressing the simple form of the mill. The materiality is consistent for that volume versus the mine piece, which is the concrete, which ties into the ground, to the materiality of the sidewalks. And then the Corten fins, which sort of mediate the two. And then just a detail of kind of the entry area, and bringing the Corten also as an accent into the base of the storefront. In terms of sustainability, our team is very experienced. They've built Passive House. They've done a lot of purpose-built rental projects, as well as LEED projects. We also were involved in one of the first rental LEED projects in the city of Vancouver. And we're not committing to Passive House designation here, but I think the principles of Passive House will be really guiding us in terms of continuous exterior insulation, air tightness, simple building form, airtight HRVs, yeah. We're also looking at mass timber possibilities. So CLT floors might be one option, like hybrid stick frame with CLT. we've done one rental building in Vancouver that used that approach, and it was quite effective because it was very quick. The CLT panels just fly in very quickly. The workers have a surface to work on. It's a much safer process as well. So right now, our energy model was based on meeting the Step 3 code, but we're exceeding it, and the model is based on some conservative assumptions right now. So as we test it out with our better envelope exterior insulation, our percentage better than the step code will increase. As mentioned, HRVs. One other interesting thing about the approach of having the parkade on an open area on the second level is we can leave it open and ventilate it naturally. We don't need to mechanically ventilate it. Also, we can reduce the material that's required in that zone by leaving it open. And then, our standard kind of lead guidelines in terms of recycling and waste management, low VOC compounds, and low flow to minimize water usage. So right now our performance is 6% better than Step 3 in terms of thermal energy use, and 16% in terms of thermal energy demand. And like I say, that's based on R8, and we're looking now at R12 with our latest wall assembly with the continuous installation exterior. So quickly to just run through some of the variances we're asking for. Again, our purpose here is rental, so we are trading off some of the retail depth. This is transitional area, so demand is more for the smaller office type use, which is what we're proposing, and that type of use doesn't really require loading. And again, we're trying to maximize the frontage of those storefronts, so the streetscape is still an active streetscape. Height we touched on, and because of the eave being pushed down at the side of the building, the apparent height is actually less than what's possible under a conforming building. So that applies to both the public realm, but also even the neighbors, depending on which floor you are. Of course, that one end of the eave, which we see, will be taller, but most of the building perimeter will be shorter. So shadowing as well, because that step down is on the north side of the building, our shadowing is less than what would be possible with a flat roof conforming building. So from a performance point of view, the height doesn't have a significant impact. And then this is the question that we're posing, one of the questions we're posing. We feel like the indoor-outdoor amenity is a nice feature. It kind of is consistent with how people live in Squamish and the indoor-outdoor connection. It also, in this case, helps carve out a piece of that volume and add some interest on the building. But if that is not possible, we can make it work as a purely interior space without a variance. But we feel like this is a nice feature. It could be a nice gathering space, especially given some of the units are a bit small, so the public communal aspect of this, I think, is quite important. Parking, again, we mentioned that the numbers have switched around a bit, so now we're asking for 3-car relaxation for the residential. Although with the way motorcycles are calculated, we can do 50%, or we only count 50%, so we actually have 67 vehicles for 67 units. And we would also propose to do electric charging for the motorcycles, so it would be another incentive for people to use those stalls. We've done a traffic study, and this is a very walkable area. There is transit, and more people with rental are not using cars. They're using car shares and ride shares. So 3 cars over 67 units we feel is a pretty small ask for this rental. And then just a detail of how these fins and the canopy work. The proposal is that the fins would have different orientations, so it would create another layer of interest on the facade and shadowing.
Okay. I will give you a rundown of the landscape design. We've been very lucky in that I've been involved. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
I've been very lucky in that I've been involved on a project that's actually just completed on 3rd, and so we've been able to coordinate with the city for the new paving patterns and urban design that's occurring at the ground plane. So that includes 5-foot square tree grates, the charcoal square cut concrete, the broom finish against the face of the building with the banding of the charcoals that go across. So this is exactly what we're proposing in this particular project as well, both on the Victoria side and the third side. On the third side, there's a little bit more of a uniqueness in that we have the bike lane that runs through, and then we have a little bit of a corner plaza where the bump out is. Now, we wanted to separate out the bike route to the pedestrian area, so we actually have a planted strips with the street trees in between on the 3rd Avenue side that adds a little bit of extra interest and green on the 3rd Street side, and that will also help. We're going to be obviously using absorbent soil depths, so they're 24-inch soil depths, 600 mil or 600 mil soil depths, and then obviously structural soil for the soil requirements for the street trees themselves. We actually have a small paved area on the intersection to the left that has a bench and seating, and we would be coordinating with lighting to ensure that that area is lit as well. It's a little bit a larger area. We also have bike racks that are incorporated into those spaces. So it adds a lot of activity and amenity right at the corner that draws the people down. It's actually going to be a relatively comfortable place to live, and it adds these punctuations into these interest spaces and the fins that are going to be on the architecture. And on the side street, there's more hard surfacing, so it's trees and tree grates. On the 3rd Street side, it's more planting, so it provides a little bit of an interest between, more urban, and then when you're wrapping around the corner in front of the commercial, and then more green space, but still provided quite a wide walkway in front of the commercial spaces. And we have provided good walkthroughs from the bike lane across through where the street trees are, so it is very permeable from a pedestrian sense as well. And then on the, we'll call it the narrow alleyway between the building and the neighboring property, yes, we were talking about potentially doing some planting and or stormwater management in there. It actually potentially could be an opportunity. We were talking about vines and things like that. Potentially a good opportunity would be our native hop, because it actually does grow in a partial shade situation, so it would be a nice understory one, and I think it would add that extra interest as well. It can be a really attractive plant. So let's see, just go across, right? Okay, so this is the 6th level, and this is the amenity area, is what we were talking about. So right here, this is the indoor-outdoor amenity. We were talking about providing a green space. The rendering that Tyso's on has actually shown a good image of what that would be like. And then mixed seating, so it's almost like, we were envisioning it as being almost like a benched communal area that was almost like a gathering bar space, if you will, that people could go in and actually interact and learn about each other and things like that. And then in the space that's on this area here, we were treating it more along the lines of individual spaces that people could use for separate gatherings, and I like to provide separation between these spaces. And so the seating and the planters in this location are more geared towards providing opportunity for separated space in individual small groups of 2 to 4 to 6 maximum, and then actually some screening and separation for some privacy and individual uses for these areas. We've been back and forthing about the furniture for whether or not we wanted to provide some custom furniture that potentially could provide some opportunities for some interest and wood, and providing some of that timber that would draw it back to the architecture again. The surfacing is going to be pavers, and for durability, we have a color palette that's noted on the plans as well. And then on top of it, so in the rendering you can see this is the front lower red amenity, and then the upper amenity in here, and then on the back side is the larger amenity. Oop, that's the last one there. So, that is a very short part of the landscape, and then if you want to have any comments for sustainability as well.
Yeah, just a couple of comments where this comes from. So we're going to call it, consider ourselves a socially conscious developer, and our contexts are always building community, sustainability, and livability. Right? So we take these variances quite seriously. We thought about them. And as we approach this building, it's the requirement for the necessity of rental apartments in the city of Squamish. So last year there was a 0% vacancy rate that CMHC published. So you know, the variance of the commercial space. The only other spot to put that commercial space is at the expense of the residential above. Right? We'd have to go up one floor up and make that a commercial level. So that takes away the need of rental. So that was our context here. So we've also built the largest passive house in Canada. It's an 85-unit rental apartment building in Vancouver, East Vancouver, Hastings and Skeena. That facilitated the City of Vancouver's current green building policy, where they strictly, if you rezone, you have to do LEED only. This facilitated them to now take it to a passive house, or if you need to do rezoning. So we consider ourselves a leader in the country on that. We built a co-housing project, a 31-unit co-housing project in East Vancouver, which taught us about circulation, flow. How do you create interaction with the residences, and that's what we took into account here as well. And then livability, just trying to get efficient units, you know, sufficient services or amenities around there. Took into account that parking. Yeah, so that's, I was going to say those are the three issues that we come to it. And then building a high quality building is what we're looking at as well. I mean, that's just the context of it.
Thank you. I guess we'll address the landscape first with some questions, if we can go around the table that way.
There's a material board here as well, and I forgot to mention the heat island. So the roof is proposed to be a light color metal roof, and our concern in heat island is mainly in the summer, of course, when it's hottest and the sun is highest. So we feel like the darker material for the walls creates a nice contrast with the concrete base and the accent materials, but then the roof itself would be very light color, so the sun wouldn't absorb.
Interesting. Okay. Shall we go the opposite way around with questions?
Sure. Thanks very much for your presentation. I don't really have any questions. The only one that came up was, I'm just wondering if there is some way, and this is probably more for Carrie, but is there some way to ensure, in terms of the loading variance, that only those kinds of businesses that would not require loading would actually rent those spaces? Is there any way to ever?
I mean, we could create a covenant for them.
Right.
To ensure that, but I don't think it's something that we would monitor, and it would be tough to secure that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Christina, can I just ask if we just do landscape questions only,
Oh,
just really
sorry.
quickly, and then we'll come back around and do the full round of questions.
That was my only question anyway, so go ahead.
Anyone?
Landscape questions?
No landscape, anyone?
No, that's.
I have a landscape question. Are the north amenity spaces public? Because you describe them as communal amenity spaces, but they look like...
They're part of the units below.
Okay.
Yes. Separate privacy with screen.
It's my only landscape question.
With the corner of Victoria and 3rd, was there ever consideration for, rather than a planted area in that corner, providing maybe a mini plaza opportunity, or?
We debated about that, having a wider paved area, because we originally had it as a larger paved area, and then we actually had a full strip of planting. So where the street trees were on 3rd Avenue, that whole strip originally was planted, so it fully separated the bike area from the pedestrian against the face of the building. And then we thought, well, we really needed that permeability, and then we thought about how people actually physically use the space. And I found a lot of the times at the corner plazas themselves, at the corner, people don't really want to sit at the corners so much. They want to sit at the periphery because it's more comfortable. You're not listening to the cars and the people at the corners. So we did put a bench at the corner. We provided a wider space just underneath that last tree. So the actual seating area is shaded underneath the first tree right at the intersection on the side. But we wanted to provide more paved and possible just separate spaces in between where there's planting and then paving and then planting and then paving along 3rd Avenue to give that more sort of comfort feeling rather than just a big paved area at the corner, if you will. thought that we were obviously cognizant that we had to be careful about the height of the plant material at the corner to make sure that there was no view corridor issues for pedestrians, for and bikes and vehicles and people driving and the rest of it. So any of the plant material that's in that planted area at the corner is low and 18 inches in height maximum. So hopefully that answered your question.
It
We
does.
did think about it. But
It does. And my other question, rainwater management, you spoke about it a little bit, about the walkway spine potentially being a part of that. Is there, as in your bigger sustainability objectives, is there some consideration to rainwater management, or?
Not at this time really, other than one of the things that we did identify was the fact that and the paved areas that are on the ground plane, we are going to be providing absorbent soils, which is the minimum 600 mil.
Yeah.
And then we did, as Tyzo was saying, is that corridor there could be identified as an area where we could infiltrate if possible.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just a question. So since there's not much of room for public art or aesthetic, would you use your landscape in a sculptural way to give it some aesthetic?
I think that we probably could, because an opportunity on the ground plane, in particular on Third, is that you can actually have some, as long as it's away from the intersection, to ensure that there's visibility. But there is an opportunity to put that planting that we have there on the ground plane using the vegetation. There is a little bit of a prescriptive paving pattern that is occurring both on Third and on Side Street, but I think that it can be incorporated both from a colors and materiality standpoint. There could be something that is incorporated into those landscape beds that is brought across from the architecture as well, I think. There are some opportunities there, both in colors and material, in those rectangular planting beds that are on Third.
Yeah.
Could I ask one more question? Sorry, just the area where you have the narrow sort of alleyway area. Are those meant to be permeable pavers then in there, if you're looking at it
I
for
believe it's aggregate
stormwater?
and permeable paving.
Okay.
Drain rock, yeah, it's
Drain.
permeable.
Okay.
Anyone else for landscaping questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good luck on my drive.
Thank you.
Drive safe.
Yeah. Safe in the rain.
I guess we'll continue with other questions with Carlos.
What's the height of the commercial ground floor?
So we are quite tight, it's 10.6 floor to floor.
Okay.
So probably 9 feet.
Okay. And then would if you go to CLT versus like a TGI for your floor plates, does that allow you to reduce the overall height potentially?
Potentially, but the ducts, you can't be running in duct space, in joist space anymore, so it's a trade-off. You can, if you bulkhead it, you could,
Right.
but there's maybe some flexibility.
Right. Okay. Do you guys have a preference? Does the client have a preference when it comes to the outdoor amenities, like the outdoor versus indoor?
We prefer the outdoor.
The outdoor?
The mix.
Yeah.
It's just more variable use.
Okay.
Simple as that.
Okay. That's my question.
Okay. I've just wondered about this 5 feet open space. Did Betty use part of it at least as commercial or other use for the? We are quite tight. So
Yeah.
do you think that could be used any?
Well, if the panel is strongly supporting another variance, it's something we could explore. You mean the setback and the width on the
On
side?
the first 2 units, could we use setbacks on the main floor, the main 2
For
floors?
this area here. This would be a variance.
Would it in the first 2 floors?
Yeah, it would be a variance. It was recently changed as part of the C4 changes, and the intention was to actually clarify the way the regulation, the setback regulation read. But before, buildings were actually allowed to go to lot line, and we clarified it. And unfortunately, I think we clarified it in a way that now restricts that. So unfortunately, we're probably going to be looking at changing that, and so this is something that staff have suggested and support. But obviously, it's another variance.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I would say, right now, at 5 feet, it's pretty narrow. For us, it looks like a security risk, somebody hanging out there at nighttime. So that's why we're cutting it off and prefer to cut it off. I would say that should the neighboring property, which will be developed, one developer owns 4 to 6 lots. So it is coming, it's just when. So if there's 5 feet on that side, we'd be if we're still the owners, we'd be open to doing, some kind of a walkway through the whole space.
Which in that case you remove the wall.
Pardon?
In that case,
That's right, yeah. And it would become a split easement over both
about
lots.
3 meter wide. But we don't know when. Okay, is there any chance about enhancing the entrance detail?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've tried to focus on the texture of the entry, but I think there might be an opportunity to look at the canopy design, for example, and maybe do something a bit more.
And what's the reason behind the fins on the concrete walls?
Well, I think
Just to break the concrete?
part of it was to do screening for the parking, because we're trying to keep that open in terms of ventilation. So we were trying to do some, so you're not looking at it and just seeing the cars in there. So it was partly a screening device and also partly to give more warmth, especially at the pedestrian level. So there's a rhythm that kind of changes. It relates to the scale of the pedestrians versus the building above, which is a bit more simple.
Which floor are you referring to, the main floor or upper floor?
Well, the volume, I guess we're trying to create more variation at the pedestrian level on
Right.
level 2, or sorry, at the pedestrian scale
level 2.
With those.
I'm basically referring to the, is the bike storage open?
No,
No, so those are the fins on the concrete walls.
that's right. And also spanning the gap between the base of the retail and the underside of the wood frame above.
Okay,
So you can kind of see here.
so I'm just trying to find the upper floor to see how it works in the parking level.
So on the level 2,
Is on A21? A22. But again, you have walls here.
so you can see on the plan, in some places the wall is full height, but in other places it's open.
Right.
So those create a screening device, but
Just
they,
to, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Can you tell me about your adaptable units?
Mhm. So currently we're proposing 7 adaptable units, and our guideline has been the Vancouver requirement right now. So we provide additional clearance in front of the toilet and sink. The doors to those bathrooms open out. And then the plumbing, the bathroom fixture plumbing is on the opposite side than the toilet. So somebody can operate the function of the shower tub without having to reach and get into the tub.
And also pre-wire the doors for automatic openers, the front
The
doors.
main entry.
Yeah.
And, excuse me, with the space allowance though from the Vancouver guidelines,
Mhm.
there's not, like it's 750 by 1200, I think?
That's,
millimeters?
yeah.
You know, so that's like CSA guidelines from 2004. So they've extended, increased their size requirements now, so it might just be a consideration. And my other question is around if these are adaptable units, and they're rental, how are you approaching the vanity sinks in the bathroom? Like, will you have the kick plate attached to the doors and you'll be
Sure.
able to kneel under them, and will that stand true in the kitchen as well? Because it's not, I mean, these are adaptable units. If you refine them, you adapt them to what you
Sure.
need, but as a rental unit, there needs to be consideration for that, so I'm just wondering how you're.
We didn't take it that far, so we'll consider, we'll look at doing that.
I'll have some comments.
Sure. Yeah.
That's all. Thank you.
In terms of the urban heat and the color of the corrugated metal, were other considerations of colors considered so that, I mean, I understand mine look, but it is quite dark and it is in a fairly close space for your neighbors, so, and it is a dark block. So I'm just wondering what other considerations.
Yeah, I mean, I think our sense for color was that the color should come from the material. So in case of the wood is the warm
Yeah.
brown, rust is the color. So we didn't want to apply, say, red or a color to the building paint. And for us, the darker color made a nice contrast with the concrete and also those warm materials. It is also material that we see throughout Squamish. It's part of that palette. It's kind of allows those other accents to stand out rather than it being itself a standout color. So, you know, we kind of, from very early, we just sort of went in that direction, and it seemed to make sense.
Other thoughts, I mean, I explored some materials as well. So you can get corrugated that mimics an old rusted look as well, right?
Okay.
So that was considered as well. But this just seemed to have the right balance. Right? That's what I came to.
But it is, I mean, those colors are in a, I'm sorry, it's kind of commenting, but just wondering about the color scheme. Because it's in a confined space versus some of the more open spaces of Squamish, would you have considered, did you consider other colors or that were less, and in terms of the urban heat, was it tested for that?
We haven't tested specifically the heat absorption, but like I mentioned, the roof would be light colored, and that's our main concern with urban heat. The walls themselves, low light, that's not the hottest light.
Okay.
The upper noon and summertime heat is what we're mostly concerned about.
Okay. And in terms of the laneway loading or lack of loading, how would tenants load in and out of this building?
There's parking right out front. So if they're moving in and out, so
Yeah, can you park a van out there?
yes.
Okay, without interfering the flow of traffic?
Yep, there's you see curb bulges.
Oh, okay. All right, and then just my last question on that is that sort of what looks like a public space, Roland, would you consider that in terms of public art and an aesthetic for tenants and or just the public walking by to use that space?
That front corner.
Yeah, I know it's kind of small.
That's
understood.
also off-site, so that's partly district.
Oh,
We're
that's
constrained to
district,
city
okay.
Squamish, yeah.
But is there a requirement or is there a requirement to do that in public?
So this particular corner is not one of the corner plaza areas, so it doesn't have to comply to those development permit guidelines. We would just look to best practices for streetscapes, ensuring that there's amenities like bike racks and seating and things like that.
Does BC Housing have any kind of requirement for, people to have an aesthetic in their realm?
I'll clarify the BC Housing. So this falls
Yeah,
under,
thank you.
BC Housing, they call what's called a housing hub.
Yeah,
And so this falls under that, and it's provide rentals, affordable rental for that middle income band. And they're providing construction finance. So they're not going to manage the building. So it is,
not like on Buckley Avenue.
that's right. Yeah, it's not a social housing building, but it's providing, meeting, middle income.
Mid-range, yes, that part I understood.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks guys. There's no residential cooling in there, and then with the dark facade, like I think you had just mentioned that you maybe hadn't looked into how much heat absorption. Is that a consideration at all, like with how much heat absorption with the darker facade?
Our thought is that because we've got insulation on the exterior, that that's going to keep the heat out. And the HRVs will provide that circulation. And there's also some glazing requirements that we're putting on one or two of the sides. More required.
And this southwest corner also has a lot of exterior balconies, which are providing a lot of that passive shading.
Okay. So the upper amenity, if you leave the upper outdoor amenity, is that a glass ceiling on that or a glass roof?
Glass roof, yes.
Right. Okay. And then the upper outdoor amenity on the south side, is there any covered areas on that, or is that all open space exposed?
That's all open.
That's all.
Yeah, and that's like we said. You see those pop-up roof stairs? Those are stairs to the unit below. So those would be assigned to the units directly below.
Right. We talked about making that public, but it takes us into a 7-story building. And now the whole building has to elevate to non-combustible.
Okay. And then so, because this is a purpose-built rental building and BC Housing is involved, like, I'm guessing the reason for not looking into going, like passive houses obviously would be going to one extreme, but like step code 4, 5, like the form of the building's there already, is it possible to go that way and still keep the affordability of?
It starts to elevate everything, so we're doing things,
Like I know you're exceeding step 3 in a few different ways.
yeah, on a technical basis, but we got a list, there was a list of items that we're providing that we feel are over and above requirements, like the HRBs, like glazing on the outside. Those are a list. Yeah, and like, you know, like we say, we've modeled it, our current model is conservative and we're exceeding step 3. So, you know, once we get the details of the balconies, which are now kind of, we have balcony framing structure outside, so we don't need to thermally bridge those. Like, once all of those details get modeled, our performance, we anticipate will get better. Because our value for our wall effective is low than what it will be. So I don't know that we can make a commitment and say, yes, we're gonna hit the next step, but our improvement over step 3 is gonna be. It'll be there, yeah, we haven't modeled it, we just modeled step 3 and our technical base, we've exceeded that. And then we're adding these other elements to it.
That's all.
Yeah, I only had a question about the BC Housing Funding, which you've partially answered. So it's that moderate household income band, which is for the 30 to 100?
It's tied to median income, yeah.
Yeah, tied to median income. So it's not the 30 to 100,000 household income band.
No, they tie it to the average, the median income in Squamish.
Right.
For households with children and without children.
Right, okay. And then that comes with all the associated covenants and security that
That's
you
right,
have.
yeah.
Right, okay, great. Thanks. Just the North Pathway, I'm just a bit confused because the report says it's not in the preferred location. So are you proposing that, or is it a response to the OCP?
It's a response to, yeah.
Okay, so it is in the right location, or?
No, so we have a map that highlights where mid-block connection should be supported. And because this is a corner unit, we'd rather see a mid-block higher, or closer in the mid-block of the street to break up the street, rather than to see them quite close to where there's already an intersection.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, looking at the map, it's not really clear where it is, but, okay, you just want further north.
No.
yeah, it's somewhat general, but definitely
Yeah.
not that close.
Okay.
It would be something we would look at if, say, that development were to redevelop north of this property. That would be the time where we would look at a mid-block connection.
Right, okay, so if it was to go away, you're kind of agnostic to that?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're not proposing it as a connection, we're proposing it as a setback to comply with zoning.
Oh, so it's not a through
No,
connection?
it's a secured area that's for maintenance, but if the variance, another variance would be supportable, we would consider at least partially closing.
Right, okay.
You know, we're trying to limit the number of variances that we're going to council, and this is one that we feel doesn't kill the project as much as, say, retail percentage.
Right. If that 5 feet, if that was gained out of the building, it would facilitate our parking.
Yeah.
Make it allow us to breathe a little better in that parking.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry, I thought because of the discussion with the other lot next to it and gaining a right of way there too to make a full path was what you were seeking, but really.
We're assuming that would happen, so I'm
Yeah.
just saying we're amenable to that if that, when that occurs.
Yeah, okay, that's all my question.
Cool. I've got a couple of questions for staff. Do you know what the length of the housing agreement is? Like how long the housing agreement will be?
The housing agreements that we are supporting under this priority project is perpetuity.
Oh, okay. And then a clarification on calculation of height. Are dormers excluded from height calculation?
As in, sorry.
Because it looks like the line is going through the midpoint of the main roof, whereas it's not being taken into account dormer, which is where I typically have to put.
Yeah, so I brought this to the building permit, and they say that the way they've calculated height is the dormers do not get included in that, so they have it right.
Cool. And then a question for the applicant. Have you considered further reductions in the parking to allow more commercial? Because you spoke about there's no rental units, there's also not much commercial space.
We're fighting for the requirement.
Yeah.
We're trying to get as close as we can,
Yeah.
and like you say, our priority is rental units, so if there's
ability to reduce parking to allow for more commercial, then of course that would be
For sure,
something.
yeah, that's
But
right.
we're also hitting our maximum FSR too. So if we push the commercial FSR, then that means we're taking out rental. as well.
Right. Okay. That's all the questions I have.
I don't have any questions, thank you. They've all been asked.
My question is in regards to parking, noting that it's all small stalls, has there been a look at parking for trucks? As there are many people in the town who have trucks, and we don't want to exclude
Yep.
certain types of renters.
We thought about that.
Yeah, there are some, we're again packing as much parking as we can, but there are some larger standard stalls off the lane. Wherever we can fit non-small cars, we're doing that. But like you say, there are a lot of small cars.
The preference would be to get more larger stalls in, but
Yeah.
now we've got to reduce the parking count.
I know it's
That
tough.
would definitely be the preference.
It's, yeah.
It's tight.
It will be unfortunately an issue upcoming, because you can guarantee that there's a certain percentage of people that have trucks and have to have trucks for their work or whatever else.
I mean, I'll just throw it, if design panel would support a reduction in number of stalls,
That's,
Yeah.
we'd be glad to do that.
Make them bigger.
Yeah.
yeah, that's the hard part.
Yeah.
Okay,
John, I have another question.
okay, one more question.
Sorry, with regards to this storages on the corridors, what are they made of, the walls?
It would be a 1 hour rated assembly because it's in the.
Looks like very thin kind of, and do you think you can consider put it part of the unit?
Well, this circulation area.
Because it would be fire rated, all of it.
Right.
And sprinkler, so you can,
It's an FSR issue as well.
you have FSR issue?
Well, FSR is not, the communal circulation area is not considered towards our FSR, so that's why we've done it like this.
I see.
So it allows for more storage without sacrificing living space.
Right, but if you add it to the unit, of course, the FSR would be excellent.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
There is, just to clarify, the land, because this is already zoned for C4, there's no restriction for their FSR here. We do have in our land use OCP, it is 3, but it doesn't apply to already zoned properties. So there's no effect, there's no restriction in the zone, so they can increase that, but what would impact this is that they would, their percentage of commercial would go down.
But the reality is the same area would be there, it just looks a bit strange to go through next to the storage to the unit.
Yeah, our preference would be to keep that within the unit.
Yeah, it feels better.
It's like Gary mentioned, it's what is acceptable level of reduction in commercial, and it's a number,
Well,
right?
You're already 8%, and it should be 20%. So how much percentage would go down? I don't know, 7? I think that would improve the functionality and the look of the building, because these walls are really, well, you have it 4-inch. Anyway, that's mine.
Okay. Anyone else, any other questions? So we'll go to comments. Let's start with Kristen.
Sure. So I'll just go through the variances. I think it's supportable to reduce the commercial space to allow for more rental accommodation, just given the need for that. The loading bay, I think would be a tough one potentially, just because it would be hard to manage. Who would rent what space, and then that could be a real traffic issue potentially. I think the building height makes a lot of sense in terms of a variance. The indoor amenity size, I think because you're proposing these indoor-outdoor amenities, which I think are a great idea. I think that's supportable. And I also have some issues with the parking variance, just because parking is just such a big deal. And again, a lot of people in this area have big trucks, and I know how hard it is to park those. So that's the variance side of it. And then to the other comments, so the north facade materials and massing. I really like your approach, looking at the vernacular of Squamish and bringing the mining aspect into it. I think that works really well, and it's really interesting and unique. But the building itself does have quite an imposing mass to it. So I wonder if maybe there would be an opportunity to explore some other colors on it, just to maybe, break it up a little bit and take away some of the massing. As far as the north pathway goes, I support that variance, just in terms of having that space there and having the stormwater management potential. I understand why it doesn't follow the guidelines, but I don't see that as being a really huge issue. As far as the urban heat goes, I sort of defer back to my earlier comments about maybe breaking up the massing a little bit and adding some other colors. But I do understand that most of that has to do, in terms of the urban heat, actually has to do with the roof color. So, maybe there's an opportunity to change something on the roof that might reduce that if that is deemed as being, a big issue. And then the upper story and the step back and massing, I think it actually really, because of the massing of the structure and how it's made to look like a mining building, I think it's almost imperative to have some kind of stepping back and cutting. So I'm fully supportive of how you've approached that on the upper level and having some of those cutouts open, and the use of the outdoor space for the private units, and also for the cutting the amenity space and allowing for that outdoor space as well. I think it's a great project. I really like it. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I agree. I really like the way the building looks. I actually would keep the colors as they're proposed, because I very much like the way it looks. I think it's interesting that if you were to compare the way this building is designed to the guidelines, especially from Fort Character and stepping back, it does not meet those guidelines. If I recall, when it went to ADP at the time, there was not really strong support for that wedding cake style to be maintained. It's kind of a hangover from some old documents, and so I would just say that it seems like buildings that are not following that recommendation are getting approval from our group here. And it has a lot to do with energy efficiency and just the new realities of everything. So just a note for how we kind of approach these buildings in the future. Just pure preference, maybe have a look at some options for the wood soffit color. It doesn't necessarily fit in with the kind of milling mining motif to me necessarily. Something that a stain that might weather and bleach with the sun and kind of still look good. It could be something almost like a pre-worn wood or something that really speaks to that weathered mining feel. Could be quite cool. I definitely prefer the outdoor amenity space for the way it makes the building look and feel. I think it'd be a great use of space. And yeah, I guess just also, and it's back to kind of general zoning and how it's written. I think that one floor of commercial is appropriate in this location. It's like two ways off the main drag, and I think that the requirement to have 2 stories of commercial is a huge challenge on lots where you need to put parking above ground. And a lot of the people that have purchased property in the last couple of years and have had that zoning change are going to struggle to make these projects work. So I think if it wasn't if you weren't hitting that higher environmental standard, and I think with the right detailing and air tightness, you will get to step 4. And maybe with a bit more money on windows, you might get to step 5. So if you weren't proposing that, I would have some reservations because it is quite dense as far as unit density goes on the site. But overall, I think it's the right approach. And for the variances, ditto. Yeah, just so it's recorded.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I don't have any problem with the percentage of the commercial. I think it's fine. Loading bay, I think we can deal with it. Height, I'm okay. Amenity is fine, especially with outdoor. Parking variance, I think it's too low. I don't know, it's because of the number of units. that you have to go 88%, I mean 76 versus 67. I think, as mentioned, all of them small, we will have a problem eventually. So that's an issue that we need to deal with. I don't know how, as mentioned, because we have to bring the parking up. I don't know, maybe we can make it 3 levels of parking. I don't know, but still, to me, it's a problem. I very much support the setback on the upper floor, and color scheme looks good to me. That's fine.
Yeah, I'll mimic what just been said. I actually really enjoy the colors and the thoughtfulness of how you've come to this place. I think the height is, the variance is fine. I might seek another variance to extend into that northern sidewalk to gain a bit of space for your parking. I think that might be a bit manageable. And then in terms of your adaptable units, you've got your pen ready. There's a number of things that you need to consider because these are rental units. You need to have flooring and your kick attached to doors beneath the sinks so that you can reel under them. I'd encourage you to put a pull-out shelf somewhere adjacent to the sink in the kitchen so you've got a workable surface to reel under. Your appliances need to be operable from the front of the units. That includes an overhead vent. You need to have backing in the walls in the bathroom. I might be inclined to switch the toilet so that you could have the toilet adjacent to a wall, to have grab bar beside the wall as well as behind the toilet. You should have an adjustable rod in your closet in the bedroom so that it could be lowered if necessary. Do you have a washer dryer unit in there? That too needs to be accessible so that you've got some controls on the front of the units. The windows as well, I don't know what the height of your windows are, but they should be viewable from a seated position out the window. And then also your balconies, that you've got some kind of, either a bevel that doesn't exceed, I think it's like, it's fairly steep, 50%, but I mean, it's a short span. You can look that up online. If you have a look at the new CSA standards, the 2018 version, they've got some good examples. And otherwise, yeah, I think the building looks great. Oh, I also encourage you to potentially have some heaters on in the outdoor amenity space, just to make it a bit more usable when it's raining sideways. And otherwise, yeah, I think it's like a good thing.
Okay, those are good comments.
Yeah.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do echo many of the comments here, particularly on the variances. But I do find that the massing and the color are very imposing on the streetscape, and that's my concern is that it is a very dark color imposed on a small streetscape. So strongly consider a lighter color possibly to be not quite so imposing and the mass, because you have to keep the mass in order to keep your units, which is a challenge. And just again use your landscape as to create an aesthetic and an artistic element, because you want to create a private place in a very, it is a middle income, so you still want to have a beautiful place. So use as many elements artistically and aesthetically, your green, your landscape, as well as your, the comment is the maintenance of the wood over time. Just consider that. It's lovely. The fins are beautiful, but just...
They're corded steel.
Oh, sorry. I thought they were wood. Which one was wood?
This soft.
Oh, well then consider that, because they're up.
Yeah.
And you made that comment.
Yeah.
That's right. That's it.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I think the building's gorgeous. I thought that before I saw your color board or your material board, that it was gonna be a lot darker. I don't think it's actually as dark. Okay, yeah, I don't see that being an issue. It's a much lighter gray than I thought it was based on the renderings. I like the shape of the building. I kind of like everything about it, to be honest. I think the indoor-outdoor amenity is definitely the way to go. I don't see the reason to kind of box that in. I think having covered outdoor space in Squamish is the smart move. Like, we get a bit of rain, so. Someone mentioned possibly getting rid of that walkway along the north side as another variance, and then maybe upping the parking. I think that's a smart idea, for sure. I think parking's gonna be a big problem, and yeah, I don't really see that walkway being a critical thing. Thank you. The height I'm okay with. I think I echo most of what Carlos had already said about the variances, and I think Carlos also brought it up, like the building looks, like I think when you guys get into energy modeling on this and get down to the nuts and bolts of the thermal bridging and everything else, and again, maybe with some money spent on windows, I don't think you're gonna have a hard time hitting step 4, or, you know, and I think that's the way we need to be going anyway, so. I understand not wanting to make the commitment right now, but with the expertise that you guys have, and yeah, I think that we should be aiming for a step 4. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for a well thought out design that's meeting social objectives. Definitely support that. Excited to see that come forward. I support all the variances as proposed. The pathway, I think it's not the ideal space, it's constraining the site, and it's interrupting the continuous frontage, then just get rid of it. That's my opinion. And then the massing, materials, step backs, I support the way it's proposed based on the energy efficiency and the social objectives it's achieving, and then through a well thought out design narrative throughout the whole building. I think, as Carlos points out, we're getting away from the step back and wedding cake with the new energy modeling that we're doing, and I think we're now starting to see more of these buildings shaped like this, and we're realizing they can be appropriate on the street, and all the things, sunlight access, etc., shadowing. So those are my comments.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Really appreciate all the story and the background that's got into it. It's really helpful to see why you're asking for the variances. I also really appreciate when an applicant shows that they're asking for a variance, but they can't achieve it this way, but here's what we're proposing, so it kind of makes us feel like it's not kind of a given pushed upon us. I actually agree with the parking reductions. I think less parking in Squamish might result in more sort of motor cars cropping up and things like that, so I think it's a kind of push and pull about that. I agree with removing the loading bay, because I think the market might dictate who uses those spaces. If there isn't a loading bay, so you might get more offices. Support the variance for the indoor and outdoor amenity space. In an ideal world, I'd maybe encourage a larger amenity space, because the rendering kind of showed 6 people up there, kind of quite cozy, and if you've got 120 plus people in there, and it's New Year's Eve and everyone wants to get up there, it's going to be a bit cozy. I also appreciate that you put it on the south corner, which is a desirable corner with views of the chief and everything like that, so that's really commendable. And I would maybe encourage you to check with planning about that variance to move the second 2 floors up to that 0 lot line, because especially if we're going to try and force a pathway further up, I think that would be good. And I wasn't convinced about the height to begin with. Just because I felt the design could have been achieved without it, and I feel like everything's kind of creeping up, and where is the limit? But I've been persuaded after the presentation, so I support it now. So yeah, those are my comments.
Most of my thoughts have been said, but I'll go through them again. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was a really thoughtfully put together piece, and you really walked us through not only the context of this building, but to others' points, understanding the rationale behind your variance has been really helpful. I support all the variants. I think there's really good reason for all of them, and would also be okay with the loss of that alley space in opportunity for a bit more breathing room in the parking area. Overall, the form and character and massing of the building I think is really fantastic, and the layering with your narrative is really strong. I wouldn't really change anything about the materials or the form and character. It could be interesting to consider wrapping the inside of the patios with wood rather than the metal sidewall. Complete opinion, just take it or leave it, but it could be an interesting look and feel of those patio spaces. With the corner kind of planted space, just through detailed design, just be considerate of the pedestrian pathways and desire lines. I think those plants may get quite trampled, but that can be dealt with detailed design. Sustainability, really appreciative of the approaches that you're taking with the building. It would be great to give consideration to the rainwater management strategy, seeing if there's additional opportunities there. Is there an opportunity potentially for a cistern for the irrigation? Is there an opportunity potentially for the bump outs to become rain gardens and maybe even taking the water from the streets themselves? A bit out of the scope, but I think it'd be really powerful to have a rainwater story integrated with the architecture as much as possible. I would give consideration to the planting, seeing opportunities to get more pollinator planting into the planting palette just to allow for a bit more habitat in the project. And then just a small detail with bike racks, just as you're moving through detailed design, friendly reminder of a mountain bike and just being thoughtful of the realities of that. And if there's an opportunity for some sort of bike wash, it would help with the building in general. Just they're muddy, they're messy, and it'd be a shame to have mud track through this lovely building. Just a small aside, the detailing of the entry with the board form and then the inscribed tree bark that's pretty cool. So thanks overall.
Yeah, thanks very much. I agree. This is a really well done project. I agree with all the comments that we've had so far. And in particular the commercial, I'm a heavy supporter of commercial in the C4 zone downtown, particularly on Cleveland Avenue. But in this case, given the use of the building and that it's on 3rd Avenue, I absolutely agree with your take and where you've gone with the commercial. 8.8% is like, is actually, it's enough that it gives us some activity, but is not too active. So I really like that idea, and I agree that with your loading and whatnot. I guess my two additional comments. One you've heard before is some attention towards truck parking. If you lose that path, and you can get more space, and even if you were to lose a small stall or two, in favor of providing some variety in the parking shape.
I would prefer to do that.
Yeah, and a trucks only labeled stall, just kind of like there are small car only stalls, right? So anyway, that would be great to see. And then curious on, so the larger amenity space up top is on the northeast side of the building, and I had a thought that perhaps on the southwest, which is facing along Victoria Street, then you might get a little bit of a nicer exposure out there for the people that are on that. Just a thought.
But that one is not public. The one on the other side is private roof decks.
The large one?
The large one on the right side of the plan is private, for private decks.
Mm-hmm. Even so, I'm just thinking, well, it's actually in relation to the street, so I guess I should come in with saying that I feel like that side of the building along the southwest side on Victoria is very tall to the street. And then, so if you have this step back on the other end of the building and you moved it down to the southwest corner, then you're achieving a little bit more light and down into the street. But that's a pretty big design change, but it's just a thought at this point from myself. And that's all my comments. So I think, does anyone else have any other comments to make? Pretty good round. We don't vote on this because it goes straight through, so there wouldn't be, but we could probably say anecdotally that we all
I
support.
believe you can still vote on it. Your vote is still important to council.
Mhm.
They do see that regardless if it goes straight through.
We'll take a unanimous vote.
Does everyone want to go with number A, which is that the advisory design panel supports project and does not need to see any, does not need to see changes?
Sure, second.
All for?
Sure.
All against? None? There we go. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Yeah, always welcome.
Oh, yeah? We're not quite,
You guys did the legwork.
of course, we're not quite done yet.
Oh, we need to make a
We're not quite done yet.
I have a few more observations.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, we can quickly move to terminate here. Is everyone in favor?
Yeah. I mean, it's brilliant to council. So they listen.
Thank you, everyone.